Throughout the world, people go to extremes. There's amazing ingenuity and some stuff that's mind-bogglingly dangerous. Some people push the limits because they have to. Others because they choose to. In this episode of The World's Most Extreme.
Cities are the places where people share ideas to build culture.
Ever-growing, ever-changing. The places we live show our ability to thrive in every environment.
You can never truly tame a city. People and structures all fighting for space, fighting for resources, yet still somehow coexisting.
These are the world's 10 most extreme. The next time you moan about a nip in the air, spare a thought for the people of Yakutsk, a city deep in the icy wastes of Siberian Russia, where winter temperatures regularly sink to minus 50 degrees and under. Oh, just 47.3 today then. Positively balmy.
These temperatures aren't just cold, they're so cold that really counterintuitive things happen. If you throw a cup of boiling water in the air, it very rapidly evaporates and then condenses to form this sort of dense fog that just floats off.
As temperatures get down to minus 45, metal will freeze on contact. So if you wear glasses with a metal frame, it'll stick to the skin. In fact, any metal infrastructure now starts to buckle and crumble under the onslaught of those cold conditions.
Even steel can shatter here, but it gets worse. Leave your pants out drying for just 10 minutes and... yes, that is a man cracking his pants. But that is just the tip of the metaphorical iceberg here in the wilds of Siberia.
So Yakutsk is influenced by the Siberian high, that the whole region is affected with these sub-zero temperatures during winter. But it also sits within a valley, and the valley allows the cold, dense air to sink slowly to the bottom, making this region particularly colder than the surrounding areas.
We're over 3,000 miles and 6 time zones away from the capital, Moscow, and almost 500 miles from the coast, which makes it even colder.
Yakutsk is not the most northern city, but Yakutsk is in the middle of a big landmass, and that means that there are no big bodies of water, no warm ocean currents to help take the edge off of those cold winter temperatures.
This deep continental climate means that Yakutsk is a place of extremes. Not only is it fiercely cold in winter, but it's also pretty warm in the summer. The highest recorded temperature was almost 40 degrees. And that means that the range, if you look at the highest and lowest ever temperatures in this town, spans over 100 degrees C.
But mostly, it's just bone-chillingly cold. So cold at times it could freeze the corneas in your eyes. And yet, over 300,000 people brave the chill to live here. Some more than others. But why did they come to inhabit one of the most extreme places on Earth? Yakutsk was first settled by the indigenous Yakutsk people in the 1300s. But since the 1800s, Russians have been lured by the region's riches. First gold, then ice. But not this kind of ice. This kind. The area supplies a fifth of the world's rough diamonds.
The simple answer to why Yakutsk is where it is because of resources. It's home to one of the largest diamond mines in the world.
But if you're not put off by all the real ice, a break in Yakutsk can offer 3 tempting travel options. This little plane. A relaxing boat ride down the Lena River, when it's not frozen solid. Or a nail-biting drive along the Road of Bones, so named because the bones of the Gulag prisoners who built it are said to line its foundations. But at least even frozen Earth is land to build on. What happens if you don't even have that? Nigeria's biggest city, Lagos. 21 million people, twice the population of London, crammed into much less space. And this population is set to double over the next 30 years. Land is ever more scarce and expensive.
Lagos, which is relatively speaking and compared to other states in Nigeria, a very small mass of land with an exploding population. People are constantly flooding into Lagos on a daily basis. Because a large majority of Nigerians live below the poverty line, what that means is that many of them cannot afford land, even cheap land. And so that just leads people to look for the most affordable alternative.
And this is the alternative. Makoko. An estimated 300,000 people live off the coast of Lagos Lagoon. In what's been called the Venice of Lagos and the world's largest floating slum. Starting out as a small fishing village on the shore of the lagoon, the settlement has grown over the decades, spreading out over the water for nearly half a square mile, with stilts supporting its wooden homes.
It costs very little to set up a house on the water because you're not being taxed by the government. You don't have to worry about things like paying water bill.
But there is a cost to paying no tax.
They lack decent, if any, lavatorial facilities. There's no electricity, and if there is, it's usually tapped illegally.
But whilst life on the water means few facilities, it can provide a living.
You have here a predominantly booming fishing community. There's also a booming timber industry there, and so what they do is they fashion canoes out of wood and they fish.
The Makoko residents also use their canoes for water delivery and have built their own floating church and hairdressers. But this way of life is under threat from two sides. On one side, whilst Lagos looks to redevelop land, slum dwellers fear being cleared out. And on the other side, just like the real Venice, flooding is a growing concern.
The problems associated with a community based around the lagoonal area is the geography, really. Particularly in this part of Africa, the lagoon is facing the Atlantic Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean is slowly rising through global warming, so you've got issues about where the coastline actually is and how that changes through time. And the lagoon itself is a natural catchment for water coming in from inland. So if you have increased rainfall and increased sediment and rain coming into that lagoon, that can cause fluctuations in the lagoon level as well.
It may be called a floating slum, but most of the buildings stand on stilts, so are still vulnerable to rising water.
The irony of living in Makoko is that people make their living from the water, from fishing. But then water also happens to be their main enemy because the water could turn against them any time. No one knows when the next flooding disaster will take place.
An even bigger irony is that Makoko may actually hold solutions to the problems of Lagos itself, because they've discovered a way to survive in a disappearing land.
The Lagos state government sees Makoko as an eyesore, but I think another way of imagining this community is a wonder, one of Nigeria's many wonders. You have a nation that's faced with an astronomically booming population, and you have these ingenious people who've made a community on water from out of the paucity of land. And I think that in itself is applaudable.
Norway, a land of mighty mountains, trolls of the mythical kind, and very, very long nights. One town here doesn't see day for over 6 months. 100 miles west of the Norwegian capital Oslo is Rukan, where 3,000 people live without direct sunlight for half of the year.
The inhabitants are living in the bottom parts of steep-sided valley. The very position of that valley within Norway means that for large parts of the year it's completely in shadow. It comes to be one of the darkest places on Earth.
Rukan is hidden in the narrow valley of Gjesterfjord and is overshadowed by Gostatoppen, a 2,000-metre mountain which blocks all sunlight from September to April every year. Ironically, the mountain is the very reason that Rukan exists.
It's an ideal place to make hydroelectricity. You have perched water, you can run that water down through gravity and generate electricity.
A point not lost on engineer Sam Eder, who in 1905 purchased the 104-metre-high Rukan Falls to power what was then the world's largest hydroelectric station. In doing so, he founded the town. Nobody gave a thought to the lack of sunlight.
Long winters when everything's dark, it's not a nice place to be. It can be quite depressing.
It's bad enough to live where the sun goes down early and it comes up late, but then you live in a valley where the sun doesn't even come above the edge of the hills, doesn't even break the horizon. Then you're really subjecting yourself to a kind of a grim lifestyle during those winter months.
From 1925, the town began to gather to celebrate the spring equinox and the arrival of the sun. Worried for the community's well-being, Sam Eder built a cable car to carry people nearly 1,000 metres up the mountain to feel sunlight on their faces. But fast forward 90 years to 2013, and the town realised there was a way of getting the sun to come to them. It's all done with mirrors. 3 moving mirrors, measuring 17 square metres each. And powered, of course, by solar energy.
The path of the sun in the sky is responsible for this town being so dark. To make sure that the light keeps on shining on the town, the mirror has to track the sun throughout the day and the year as its position changes in the sky.
Controlled by computer from the market square below, the mirrors are adjusted to catch the sun's rays and reflect them into the centre of Rukan. Still, to supply the whole town with sunlight, you would need a lot more mirrors.
Let's not exaggerate the amount of sun you can bounce with a mirror that size. It's less like having the sun in the sky and more like having a narrow spotlight, where if you stand in the right place, you get some sun. I'm sure it's nice. It doesn't quite make up for the overall dreariness of the spot throughout those winter months.
Although the people of Rukan still have little need to reach for their sunnies, the mirrors at least offer a glimmer of an eternal summer in the coldest of winters. But whilst in Rukan, darkness magically becomes light. Over 2,000 miles away in Egypt, there's real alchemy. In a 2-square-mile suburb of Cairo, the city's trash piles high on streets, balconies, and even rooftops. But the people here aren't lazy. Manshiat Nasser is home to the world's greatest recyclers. Cairo has a population of over 20 million, which could overload its formal garbage collection system. If not for the Zabaleen, 70,000 freelance refuse collectors, many from Manshiat, who go door to door, picking up the city's trash.
The Zabaleen, a group of people who, since about 1940, have taken on the role of collecting and sorting and recycling waste in the city. They perform a fascinating function because essentially they do this for free.
But the canny Zabaleen don't go out of pocket. They sort through more than 2 million tons of Cairo's trash every year, much of which they recycle locally and then sell.
تغسل شو اللي بالك الموتور شغال عليها بتغسل بعد كده نروح الفضة الثانية نروح مطلعينها على الشط كده طلعينها على الشط يتشطب فين بعد كده ينشف الشابة بنشف وبعد كده نروح داخل على الكسارة يتكسر ويتعبى بشكل بعد كده يروح الخرازات.
قول له دي بتبقى المعلقة بتتصنع بتبقى المعلقة المعلقة دي اللي انت بتشوف بيها المعلقة الكشري.
Items that can't be recycled go to market. This remarkable system all started with pigs. This is an unusual sight in Islamic Egypt, which considers these animals unclean. But the Zabaleen are Coptic Christians, originally pig breeders, who started recycling local food waste to feed their animals, a tradition which continues today.
اللي بتاكلها الخنازير. يعني من غير الخنازير دي الغراب صديق البيئة. الخنزير ده صديق الإنسان.
It may seem chaotic, but the Zabaleen system recycles twice the proportion of waste as the average European city does.
No one loves the idea of spending one's life sorting through garbage with your bare hands. But maybe there are some lessons here about using our resources more efficiently. Maybe we could replicate in a more modern way because they are achieving something important, which is that they are recycling or reusing something like 80 or 90% of what otherwise would just be thrown into a dump as garbage.
مش كل الناس في اللي حضرتك اللي يعني في ناس اللي بتفهم يعني ومقدره قيمه الشغل ولقمه العيش دي بتبقى عادي ممكن تعملها كويس تبقى في حاجه احسن من كده يعني هو عامه يعني عايز اقول لك اكل عيش ما فيهوش عيب هو العيب اللي انا مد ايدي والعيب اللي انا اسرق والعيب اللي انا اعمل حاجه زي كده.
This place has been called a slum, but its ingenious self-started trash economy keeps thousands employed. Manshiyat's residents are outsiders within the city. What happens when you have a whole city of outsiders? San Diego. Like most major American cities, it has world-class attractions and entertainment, modern amenities and public services, and a lot of rules. But enough of all that. Let's head 100 miles away across the Sonoran Desert to a city with no rules. This collection of trailers, ramshackle shacks, lean-tos and well-used vehicles is Slab City. In the 1960s, this land around an abandoned military base became home to a community of nomads, hippies and fugitives living off the grid with no mains electricity, sewerage or water, but free from society's rules. And they're still here. For some reason.
This piece of land is so desolate, so useless, so unwanted that nobody cares if you're here.
Around 2,000 people congregate in Slab City in the winter. But now, in a 50-degree summer heat, only 200 or so hardcore perennials stay to sweat it out. Like Builder Bill, pillar of the community for 20 years.
People come here for all different reasons of rejection, whether it's financial, not being able to pay the rent. Some of them are just flat crazy.
Bill came to Slab after living rough on the streets of San Diego.
When people come with absolutely nothing, not even seriously clothes on their back, and they don't die. You know, you can find scrap material, even garbage, to create a piece of shade to protect you from the sun.
So it may be a little unofficial, but Slab isn't so different from the likes of San Diego. It has a city mayor in Bill.
Sometimes people call me the mayor.
See? And just like any American city, Slab has its high-end neighborhood, the exclusive East Jesus. The Slabbers who live here are the only ones who've succeeded in buying their land, and they do tend to keep to themselves. So let's head over to the city centre and the Oasis Cafe with Wi-Fi internet and a coffee morning every Tuesday. Whilst some Slabbers make their way on benefits, there are jobs, kind of.
You're at the Oasis Inn at the range. I'm the short order cook. I run all these grills when they do cook, so This is a volunteer position. I get free food, free drink, free entertainment.
I work at the Oasis Club, and they're serving coffee on Tuesdays, except for yesterday, because I was lazy. And then I do the range. I do make like a little bit of tips here and there, but essentially, like if I wanted to work for someone to make money, it's a scary thing. I mean, there's no like regulations, there's no like HR department. You know, if something happens, if somebody's too rude with you or too lewd or something like that.
For those that need to get out of town, there are transport links.
There's a couple people that do have families, and they have little kids, and there's a school bus that comes down to pick them up to go to Nyland. We now have one other stop, so we now have 3 school bus stops.
For nightlife, look no further than the Range, Slab's very own live music venue.
So we don't need the drums?
Yeah.
Or the bass amp?
I think we got what we need on already.
Don't worry, it does fill up later on. Now, with all these mod cons, you may be wondering how Slabbers get all their utilities, living off-grid in the desert. Well, they simply turn to Mother Nature.
Sewer is a simple problem. You bury it. And if you have a trailer or a camper or a motorhome, they all have a dump pipe. Well, you just dig a good-sized hole under there and deal with it. Electric, you have to do one thing or another. Some people go without entirely, using candles and such. But once you get set up, you can usually trade or barter or buy some kind of solar panel.
There's no shortage of sunlight in the desert, but water is harder to come by. The Salton Sea is only 8 miles away. It's one of the largest bodies of water in the US, but it's brackish and undrinkable. A freshwater canal that runs from the Colorado mountains to Texas is off limits. But just south of Slab is a small natural hot spring.
It's very, very hard water, but when you do bathe in it, you get out and you feel rejuvenated. I heard it's because it has traces of lithium in it.
Always consult a medical professional before administering lithium.
I count it as a trade-off. I have to carry water barrels around and haul my own water, but if some other person has a water bill. I have to have solar panels and batteries and check the fluid in the batteries and make sure the panels don't get cross-wired, but another person has an electric bill. People ask me if Slab City is a good place to live, and I tell them, no, this is hell. But I have built myself a special life here that I wouldn't give up.
This city was once a beautiful, wealthy outpost of the Mughal Empire. Today, its population is exploding. And so are its sewers. Capital of Bangladesh, Dhaka, is a city under pressure.
Dhaka is the densest city in the world. There are more people per square kilometer there than anywhere else.
Nearly 20 million people live in Dhaka, twice as many as the whole of Sweden. And 500,000 more flood into the city every year from the countryside.
Dhaka is located in Bangladesh, which is a very populous and dense country. It's the centre for trade, the centre for economy, the political centre of the country, so people just flock there to find work.
With a growing population, you need space for a city to expand. Dhaka doesn't have it.
It's located in a wetland, so there's literally nowhere for it to expand into.
The low-lying land of the Ganges Delta is not the ideal choice for a growing megacity. Dhaka is squashed in between a network of rivers. But whilst floodplains have made physical expansion difficult, the city has still doubled its population in 20 years. Dhaka has not been able to build the infrastructure to keep pace with the growth of the population.
One of the major problems is congestion. Average speeds in the city are about 7 kilometers an hour. The average speed a human can walk is 5 kilometers an hour. It's the only megacity in the world without a metro system. It's the only megacity in the world without a motorway highway system.
We think our city is packed. We think when we're on the subway or on the streets, we're dealing with crowds and gridlock. But imagine commuting to work in the most densely packed, most densely populated city on the planet.
Dakar's traffic jams eat up 3.2 million working hours a day, costing the city billions of pounds in lost time. But it's not just the daily commute that overwhelms the infrastructure. Every year, Dhaka is challenged by some of the most extreme weather on the planet.
Rapid urban development, lots of new buildings, lots of new streets, often built without proper drainage. Heavy rains combined with poor drainage results in lots of surface level flooding. So flooding is another big challenge.
When the monsoons arrive between May and September, the low-lying city can be inundated with as much as 1.5 meters of rainfall, causing floods to course through the city streets and overwhelm a sewer system already choked up with Dakar's waste.
During monsoon season, you have sewers that every year just flood, are overflowing, and they need these sewers to work. So there are people whose job it is to go into these sewers, perhaps risking their lives to do so, and clear them out.
Workers remove plastics and other debris with their bare hands and no protective clothing. Sewer workers can earn up to 5.5 times more than the national average. But it means diving through rotten sewage that can be so acidic, it can damage the skin. Whilst the work is challenging, it is a testament to the lengths people will go to make a life for their families in this city. But over in California, there's a city where most people just lie around. Less than 2 miles from the glorious Pacific coast and snuggled amongst lush green countryside is the most peaceful city on Earth. Colma, population 1.5 million. The thing is, 1.49 million of them are dead. This very sleepy Californian suburb is just south of San Francisco and covers around 2 square miles, 3/4 of which is made up of cemeteries, which you'd think would give the 1,600 living residents the heebie-jeebies.
It's peaceful, and we love it. Most of the people love it. We don't have any problems at all with living with the dead. It's an enjoyable place to be. You can't ask for better neighbors, that's for sure. We love them.
It's an inclusive society with its 17 cemeteries dedicated to different nationalities and faiths. If you like star spotting, who needs Hollywood Boulevard? There's Levi Strauss. Yes, that Levi Strauss, creator of blue jeans. And there's Wyatt Earp, famed lawman of the OK Corral. Baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. And there's even space for 13,000 pets. Tuttles, you will be missed. This is where San Francisco's dead are gratefully buried.
We don't think of the dead as something morbid. We think of them as friends.
But how did all these friends come to be here?
Cities have a lot of people in them, and of course that can cause problems because when people die, you end up with dead bodies. If you bury them, you have to have space to put them in. It takes up valuable space.
In the early 1900s, with their cemeteries fit to burst and land required for a booming living population, San Fran banned burials within the city limits, and then went a step further.
In the early 20th century, San Francisco reached a bit of a crisis point. They came up with a radical solution, which was to simply move all of the dead bodies, freeing up the cemeteries in San Francisco for redevelopment to become houses or schools or roads or whatever was necessary. Literally created a necropolis, a city of the dead.
150,000 bodies were exhumed and transported to Colma for reburial. And if you couldn't afford for your dead relative's gravestone to accompany them, it was reused as construction material. So there you go. Moving house is always painful, even when you're dead. But there are towns where you don't have to be dead to be 6 foot under. In this Martian landscape, 500 miles from the nearest city, where temperatures can hit 50 degrees Celsius, there's an upside-down town. You'll find it down under, in South Australia. This is Coober, Pedy, the opal mining capital of the world. Parts of Coober seem like an ordinary town. But there's more to this place than meets the eye. Because of Coober Pedy's 2,500 inhabitants, half live underground. There are over 100 of these subterranean homes, dug into the sandstone bedrock. Even the churches are on the down low. Why? To escape the outback's brutal climate.
If you like to live in extremes, this is a place to be. Nice and cold in winter, like down to 1 degree, and in summer where it gets up to around the 45 mark. It's one extreme to the other. That's why we like to live in an underground home, because it's always a constant temperature around 22 degrees.
Here, an upside-down life is normal.
We'd come home from school, do our homework, do our chores, and then Dad would press a jackhammer in your hand and say, "Get cracking, we're making another bedroom." We grew up literally with a pick and shovel. We were born with it, just about.
Whilst the subterranean temperature remains a comfy 22 degrees all year round, ventilation shafts allow air to breeze through the dugouts so they don't get too stuffy. And it's not just comfy, it's low-impact living, because much of what little power the dugouts need comes from a solar array and wind farms outside of town. Oh, and it's also pretty stress-free.
You can build anything you like because you can design anything you like. There's no rules and regulations on how you design your home.
There has been incidences where they did break through into the neighbour's place more than once. That was back in the days when the measuring tape must have been written in some other language or something.
Building your new extension can bring unexpected benefits.
Building your houses, it's still opal field, so you always got a chance to find a bit of opal. I know a hotel in town which they decided to extend a few more rooms, and there was a nice pocket of shells which gave them nearly 1.5 million in assets, so they were pretty happy with their new extension.
Coober Pedy's entire history has been about digging holes. The idea of living underground started over 100 years ago with the miners, who slept in their mine shafts whilst they searched for their fortune. Steve Borrett has mined these tunnels on and off for 18 years.
The trace is just a thin band, usually 1 to 4 millimetres thick. It's how the opal's formed. The moisture comes down the rock and forms in cavities. And over millions of years with the pressures, it forms into an opal, silica opal. And if it doesn't get disturbed, it normally forms a colour. Sometimes you can get straight onto the big opal and you're rich. The other day, you just look for it for months and not find anything. Oh yeah, there's a nice little trace in there. Just dropped in. Oh yeah, nice little bit of colour in that. So that's what we're after. Yeah, not bad.
Surpassed by tourism, the opal mining industry has dwindled in recent years, but it's left its mark on the land.
Every one of those little piles of sand has got a hole next to it. They estimate there's over 2 million of them. And someone's been down those holes looking for opal. They're belled out underneath, so any of this ground could collapse. When you lose your footing, you just slide straight into it. And they go down, some of them go down 80 to 100 feet. You can usually tell how deep it is by dropping a little rock down it. And that one's about 60 feet. Over the years, there's been some rumours that people have been dropped down holes. There's millions of holes out there. Who knows who's down any of them.
Even if mining has moved on, this town's underground way of life has stuck.
To live underground, for me, it's just totally economical. You don't need heating, you don't need air conditioning, you don't need much at all, just a bit of power and water. And it's very efficient, so as far as I'm concerned, most people should build down instead of going up.
Here at least, the world's most upside-down town is the right way up. The Andes, stretching from Venezuela to the southern tip of Chile. It's one of the longest mountain ranges in the world. And 3 miles up, amongst the peaks, is the highest inhabited place on Earth. La Rinconada sits perched in the Peruvian stretch of the Andes. 50,000 people survive here. But at around 5,000 meters above sea level, temperatures are sub-zero and the air is starved of oxygen.
At 16,000 feet above sea level, the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere is a lot less than we have at sea level, making conditions very difficult to live in. You get exhausted quite quickly just doing anything.
At this extreme altitude, the air pressure is about half of that at sea level. And what that means is that every breath you take only contains half the amount of oxygen.
Over time, the body acclimatizes to altitude by producing more red blood cells, which carry oxygen around the blood system. Andean communities who have lived the high life across generations have evolved blood cells that naturally carry higher levels of oxygen, helping them cope better with the extremes. But this life is still harsh. These people are here for one reason. Gold has been mined in these mountains since the time of the Incas. In an extreme town, it's an extreme occupation.
Difícil también es aquí vivir. A veces todos piensan que el oro es encontrar fácil la viscolor de rosa en Rinconada. No. A veces también se vive esto. A veces no hay, a veces hay.
The miners can be working 500 meters into the mountain in cramped tunnels coated with thick ice.
El trabajo dentro del socavón es duro, dice. Es que lo mismo que la extracción, el gas que está saliendo en así.
One of the big problems is that this is not some company town with regulated work conditions. Most of these miners are basically freelancers. They're going up and digging for gold, and they're getting exposed to all kinds of dangerous conditions.
If it's risky to find the gold, it's also dangerous to process it.
The big challenge with gold mining is how do you separate that gold from the rock that it's all mixed in with? They add liquid mercury that bonds with the gold, and then you can take that gold mercury mix, throw away the rock ore, and then you heat up the mercury and gold. The mercury kind of boils off, and you're left with pure gold. The problem is, mercury is one of the most toxic substances you can possibly deal with.
And you don't want to fall ill. The nearest hospital is hours away. But it's not just medical facilities and oxygen that are in short supply in this town. There's no mains water, so they extract it from the melting glacier. There's no waste collection, so rubbish just piles up.
Bastante contaminación de acuerdo a la minería, el basural, y así vivimos.
One thing they do have is electricity, which is just as well. Because despite all they lack, La Rinconada does happen to have one of the highest nightclubs on Earth. And no South American town would be complete without a football pitch. Again, one of the highest in the world. So in this extreme environment, the people in La Rinconada still manage to make a life. From a town on the edge to a metropolis edging towards the apocalypse. This is the world's most endangered city. 38 million people living in an area of around 5,200 square miles. It's Japan's capital, Tokyo.
Tokyo is the biggest city in the developed world. Lots of very valuable real estate, some of the most highly valuable real estate in the entire world.
Packed into this spectacular city is a third of the country's population. Its government and most of its profitable industry, as well as the stock exchange, the third largest in the world. It's no surprise then that it is the richest city on Earth, with a yearly turnover of an astronomical £1.2 trillion. And that's a problem, because the more you have, the more you have to lose.
When you have a modern city that's enormously wealthy, that means there's an enormous amount of wealth that could get damaged in a flood or an earthquake or even a financial collapse. So success also means greater risk.
The world's leading insurer, Lloyd's of London, uses a city risk index, a system that ranks cities based on the potential threats to their economy. Tokyo holds the #1 spot as the riskiest city on Earth to insure, with an apocalyptic list of threats.
Tsunamis, earthquakes, radioactive fallout, attack from North Korea.
Tokyo's problems are mainly down to its geographical position.
It sits along a big fault line where you have the Pacific being subducted under Japan. And it's that subducting movement of the plates that can cause major earthquakes.
The Lloyd's City Risk Index assesses the threat from earthquakes alone could cost £1.4 billion.
Tokyo is susceptible to earthquakes, big ones. It's also part of this structure is called the Ring of Fire, the fire being volcanoes. And Mount Fuji is just an example, the largest mountain on Japan, that's a big volcano.
The Ring of Fire is the most active earthquake belt in the world. A curved zone running along the rim of the Pacific, within which several tectonic plates smash and collide, triggering violent seismic activity. In 2011, it unleashed Japan's most devastating quake, measuring 9.1 on the Richter scale. As Tokyo blazed in its wake, a tsunami flooded the east coast. The City Risk Index prices the threat of flooding at £1.5 billion. But this is only the start. It pales against the £2.5 billion reportedly at risk from storm winds.
The typhoon season within Japan runs from August to October. So any time during that period, typhoons can impact the city, can bring strong winds, heavy rain. If you have a severe or a super typhoon, wind strengths can get well above 100 miles per hour. So it can cause damage to infrastructure, transportation systems within the city centre.
Nevertheless, technology-mad Tokyo is doing its best to fight back against Mother Nature. To conquer earthquakes, skyscrapers that can actually decouple from their foundations to move with the quake. And this, a bed designed to withstand 65 tons of falling debris, although it may be more terrifying than the actual earthquake. But according to Lloyd's, #1 risk to GDP is potential interstate conflict with Japan's awkward neighbour, North Korea. That's a massive £6.8 billion risk. All Tokyo can do is prepare itself for the worst and maybe pre-order 38 million of those beds.